I am a hostage.
Who are you, or why are you holding her hostage?
This is Naveed Haq. These are Jews, and I'm tired of getting pushed around. Get on the ground.
No.
I have this gun pointed at her head.
On July 28, 2006, Naveed Haq, armed with 2 semi-automatic handguns, forced his way into the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle and opened fire. Haq, an American man of Pakistani descent, told a 911 operator that he was angry at U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, specifically sending bombs to Israel, and that he blamed the Jews. When the terrifying ordeal was over, 5 women were wounded and 1 woman, Pam Wechter, was killed. What seemed like an open and shut anti-Semitic hate crime became far more complex when it was revealed that Naveed Haq suffered from severe mental illness.
I was at work at the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle. It was a Friday afternoon, beautiful sunny day, July 28th. I was sitting in my office and looking at this little bird on the tree. I looked at the clock and realized that it was about time for my niece, Kelsey, to show up because she was staying with me that week. So my eyes were on the clock. I was listening for her voice. And instead of her voice, what I heard was an angry, male stranger voice. I could tell he was angry, and he was screaming awful, terrible things about Jews and Israel. So I knew that the only thing I could do was to shout out as loud as I could, call 911. As soon as I yelled that, he started shooting.
And as he continued down the hall, he just continued on his rampage of shooting people. I'm not sure when Pam Wechter got up, but she ran down the hallway trying to escape, and she was shot twice. The first time wasn't a fatal shot, but the second time she was fatally wounded.
He's continuing this spree and eventually gets to Dana, who is pregnant in her office. She gets shot. He leaves her, and then he comes back because he hears her talking. She's on the phone to 911.
I'm hostage. I'm pregnant. Would you like to talk to the police? Sir, hold on here. Here he is. Who?
And so she offers him the phone, and he takes it.
I'm just so upset at these people.
I'm not upset at the people. I'm upset at your foreign policy. These are Jews. I'm tired of getting pushed around and our people getting pushed around by this situation in the Middle East.
Those dispatchers were incredible. And they talked to him and eventually got to the point where he said he was just going to give up.
Chaos in downtown Seattle. Police rushed to the Jewish Federation Center where a man reportedly forced his way inside, announced, "I am a Muslim American angry at Israel," and opened fire.
This is being treated not only as a homicide, we have 1 person who has been killed, also the people who are wounded, but it is also, as the mayor stated, being treated as a hate crime.
After purchasing weapons and eventually deciding upon the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle as his target, Naveed Haq drove from Tri-Cities in eastern Washington on I-90 to Seattle.
He made choices in the weeks and days before this event as to what he was going to do and who he was going to target. He had tested his firearms on the way to Seattle. He knew which firearm he preferred to use.
There were big headlines, there was lots of concern, and so the fear was that this was part of some sort of broader attack on Jews in America. Well, we all came to learn Haq's history of, significant mental illness, his history of hospitalizations, his erratic behavior before the shooting. It became clear that he was not a well man.
He had been a star pupil in his high school. He had gotten into an accelerated program to become a dentist at an Ivy League school. And then when his mental illness overtook him, he wasn't able to complete that program, returned to Tri-Cities, lived with his parents, wasn't able to achieve all the great things that he had aspired to.
He plotted it out. He knew what he was doing. He knew where he was going. He had a plan, and he carried it out. I think you can be mentally ill and still be required to be held accountable for your actions.
I mean, the mental defense in this case was insanity. And if you are found to be insane at the time of the crime, you go to Western State Hospital and you might be out in a couple years. It's a very concerning defense when you're talking about a homicide. And that realization weighed heavy on us.
He was charged with aggravated murder in the first degree. In Washington, at the time, there were only two possible sentences for aggravated murder: life imprisonment without parole or death. My prior boss, Norm Mailing, decided not to pursue the death penalty. We would have a hate crime for each of the 6 victims. There were also 5 counts of attempted murder in the first degree for each of the other 5 women who were shot.
The defendant, Naveed Haq, was on a mission. He was on a mission to make a political statement that the Jewish people in our society have too much power. That statement included that it was time for America to get out of Iraq. The defendant made a decision to arm himself with guns, a knife, to find a location that was relevant to the statement he was trying to make. And the location he found was the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle.
Mr. Haq believed that what he was doing was actually going to reverse the course of 2 wars. He actually thought that his actions were going to have a positive societal effect. This is insanity. When he is inside the building and when he is taking shots at these innocent, unarmed people, is psychotic. At the conclusion of this case, the defense will ask you to return a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict. It is not in the best interest of society or others for him to be released to a less restrictive alternative. But it is in the best interest of society for Mr. Haq to remain locked in a state mental hospital. Thank you.
You can have a diagnosed mental illness that's a serious mental illness, but unless it either causes you to be insane at the time of the killing or encumbers your ability to premeditate or intend, you don't get to avail yourself or use your mental illness to lessen your punishment or culpability.
And he just kind of went around in a circle, just bang, 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 bang. It was the most terrifying thing that had ever happened to me.
On July 28, 2006, 14-year-old Kelsey Burkham was visiting her aunt, Cheryl Stumbo, and taking art classes in Seattle. She arrived at the Jewish Federation after class, as planned, but she was met at the door by Naveed Haq. He held her at gunpoint, and he demanded to be let in. What followed was a bloody rampage that would claim the life of the Federation's 58-year-old annual campaign director, Pam Wechter.
In the afternoon hours, did Kelsey arrive as she would normally do, somewhere close to 4 o'clock?
Yeah, the phone rang and I answered it, and I heard she asked to come up. I glanced back towards the monitor, and I just saw her in the monitor, and I went ahead and let her up.
All the doors had security on them. You could not get in without either a keypad code or being buzzed in. Naveed was there waiting for somebody to get buzzed in. He pulled out a gun and held a gun to her while she buzzed open the door.
They went up the stairs, and Kelsey simply kept walking. And she walked right into the restroom, and she hid in the restroom and called 911.
Yes. I'm at the Jewish Federation and the man with a gun here.
When she comes in, we usually will, say hello to each other, and she just ran past to the bathroom, and I thought, man, she must really have to go to the bathroom or something. And then I saw somebody coming up the stairs.
Tell us, you see him coming up the stairs, tell us what you see or hear next.
He came up the stairs, and I asked if there was anything I could do to help him, and he walked up to my desk, and then he pulled out a gun and held it over the reception counter and said something along the lines of, I'm upset with what's happening in Israel and Lebanon right now, and I want to speak to your manager.
Tell us what alerted you that there was something going on in the office.
I heard a loud male voice coming from the lobby area and asking to see the supervisor, and I heard Layla say, "I'll go find her now." And I was standing just inside my doorway, and I looked out and saw that Layla was coming down the hallway, sliding with her back against the hallway wall with her hands up.
When you saw Layla, was she saying anything to you?
Yes, she said, there's a very angry man out there and he has a gun. She was kind of stage whispering, like she was trying to keep it quiet. And then all of a sudden he was there.
I could tell he was angry. He was holding a gun up with both hands at chest level, and he was screaming awful, terrible things about Jews and Israel and how he wanted to get on CNN and Larry King Live, and he was only here to make a point.
I immediately kind of went into emergency training and turned and said, "Carol, call 911. I saw the defendant aim his gun.
And he just kind of went around in a circle. He spun in a circle and just bang, 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 bang.
And my ears were ringing, and he turned around and turned to me, and I said, "Why are you doing this?" And he raised the gun and pointed it at my face. And somewhere in there, it felt like I had been hit in the side. I just hit the floor of my office and put my arms and my hands over my head and just thought, this is it, he's gonna kill me.
You know, I was face down on the floor, and, you know, my face was pressed into the industrial carpet, you know, in workplaces, and that smell to this day is the smell of waiting to die.
After you were shot, did you hear any other shots?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe, I guess, the sequence of shots you heard, or the pattern of shots you heard?
Seemed like there was quite a burst of shots all at once. It was hard to keep track of the number, but it was kind of like pow, 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 pow. And there's just a lot of sound for a while.
He didn't target the ceiling, the floor, he targeted the women. And every woman that came up to him or somehow got close to him got shot.
You know, when I heard the gunshots, I turned around towards the door, and that's when he shot me in the side, and the bullet hit my spine, and my leg went out entirely, and so I fell back. And then I was like, oh, you know, I'm bleeding. I probably need to find something to hold over the wound, because I don't, you know, if I'm hit an artery or something, I want to hold to try to keep myself from bleeding out. And I looked around and I found a rag, and I held it to my side. At some point, I saw Pam Wechter, run down the hallway, and heard more firing.
And when Pam Wechter, who had already been shot, tried to escape, he chased her down, he hunted her down, and he reached over a balcony and shot her in the head.
I can still remember the testimony offered at the trial. It was, I mean, the folks at the Jewish Federation thought they were going to die. I mean, they thought that this man had arrived to kill them. This was absolutely carnage.
Came back with his gun and said to me, "Now you're my hostage." And he, the whole time, was perfectly cool, which was, to me, the most frightening.
Jewish Federation worker Dana Klein was finishing up for the day when she was shot in the arm by Naveed Haq. Klein was 17 weeks pregnant at the time, yet she managed to call 911 while Haq continued shooting. As she pleaded for help, Haq returned and grabbed the phone. This terrifying call was played for the jury and became one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the prosecution.
Operation Fire 34. There's been a shooting and an invasion. Avenue, Seattle. City police right now. I need you to stay on the line and answer any questions. I can't. The guy's here and he's screaming out that he's gonna take more hostages.
So they're telling me to stay on the telephone. And all of a sudden in my doorway, the perpetrator came back with his gun and said to me, because you're too stupid to listen to directions, now you're my hostage. And he walked into my office and put the gun towards the left side of my head.
I shot her once.
But where did you shoot her?
I shot her in the arm.
In the arm? Okay.
I have this gun pointed at her head.
I know. But I don't want anything more to happen to her, and you know what's going to happen to you.
I don't give a
After what felt like a couple minutes, I could start hearing again. And what I heard was screams and cries of all these women that I worked with. Layla among them. Layla was lying next to me on the floor, and she was crying that she couldn't feel her legs. And I was trying to figure out what to do.
Towards the south hallway, I heard some screams over there that I think I recognized as Christina Rexroad, screaming that she was bleeding to death and, you know, things like that.
I was calling for people and telling them that I had been shot and I'm bleeding a lot, and I turned around and went running down the north hallway towards the back stairs. I went down the stairs, but I don't remember going down the stairs. There's a door at the bottom of the stairs that goes out to Lenora Street. I remember going out that door, and I ran smack dab into a police officer.
To guide these women through a court experience that's really frightening. You have to find in yourself the strength to not let the emotion overwhelm you, because when they're on the stand testifying, they need you to be that rock to help them get through their testimony. And that's what I had to do.
What do you want me to do?
I just want you to call the media and tell them
I already
that
did.
Muslims are very upset at you sending bombs to Israel.
Okay.
He started talking about Hezbollah. This is his personal statement. And he, the whole time, was perfectly cool, which was, to me, the most frightening.
What's your name, hon?
Kelsey.
How old are you, hon?
14.
14? Okay.
Kelsey's 911 call, when you understand it is a young teenage girl who Haq only used to get in and then turned his attention away from her. She was able to go into the women's bathroom and lock herself into a stall and then hear what was happening outside, knowing that her aunt was out there.
I heard screams after I heard the shot.
Yeah, we've got some other people calling, too.
And I don't know if anybody got hurt.
Okay. Well, you just stay where you are as long as you're safe right now, okay?
I was trying to figure out what to do. And then it occurred to me that Kelsey was going to walk into this. And I knew I had to stop that from happening.
It seemed like 10 minutes went by, but nothing was happening. So I felt like maybe he's gone away. And so I started listening for his voice. And I could hear that it was further away down the hallway. I can stand up, so I tried to stand up, and I was able to. And then I thought, well, I have to figure out if he's in the hallway or not. I could hear him talking to Dana Klein. I could hear her voice. So I thought, well, maybe he's in her office with him, and I can get out without him seeing me. So I just took a deep breath and turned left and started going. Got to the top of the stairs, and I looked down. Pam was lying there on her back, and there was a fist-sized black hole where her heart would be, and she was laying with her mouth open, and her eyes were open, and she wasn't blinking.
I don't have any memory of actually stepping over her body. That's one of the things that I just don't remember to this day. But I had to have done it because I got down to the first floor. I got out to the sidewalk. It looked like an entire SWAT team on the corner, and they were yelling at me to come run towards them.
The precise why we'll never know for sure. Mr. Hawk said multiple times that he had a message to get out.
Here, patch me into CNN.
I don't have a way to patch you into CNN. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Here, I'll give myself up. This was just to explain.
You're going to give yourself up?
Yes.
I woke up a week later, and my sister was standing next to my bedside, Kelsey's mom, and I couldn't talk because I was intubated. And so she reassured me that Kelsey was okay. It was the most terrifying thing that had ever happened to me. Also, the most unexpected thing that had ever happened to me.
Naveed Hawk went to a couple of gun shops. And the form had a question about mental illness, and he checked no.
No one would want Naveed Hawk to be able to walk into a store and buy a gun. That's exactly what he was able to do.
The defense said that Naveed Hawk's mental illness was so profound at the time of his attack on the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle that he didn't know right from wrong, and that his illness had in fact worsened by a recent change in medication. But it was Hawk's own mother who painted the defining picture of the true severity and depth of his mental illness.
Are you related to Naveed Hawk?
Yes, he's my son. He went to UPenn. He was not doing very well there. He started having a lot of problems.
Yeah, what kind of problems?
A lot of mental problems. He was hearing voices. One time he called me. He was whispering. I said, Naveed, I can hear you. Talk a little louder. He said, Mom, people are listening.
I think that not enough attention is paid to mental illness and the damage that is done and how pervasive it is. It doesn't excuse in any way what Naveed Hawk did, but I believe he was motivated by the demons in his head.
After he came back from UPenn in 2000, he bought a gun in 2001.
And why did you take it from Naveed?
I truly believe that it was not safe for him to keep the gun. He always thought somebody's controlling his mind, telling him to do things he doesn't want to do.
Given his history of mental illness and given his, bizarre behavior at the time, no one would want Naveed Hawk to be able to walk into a store and buy a gun. That's exactly what he was able to do.
So, a couple of weeks before the shooting, Naveed Hawk went to a couple of gun shops. There was a waiting period, and he also had to fill out a form, and the form had a question about mental illness. And, it's yes or no. And he checked no. Problem is, being mentally ill doesn't prohibit you from being a smart person, and Hawk is a smart person. Seems pretty obvious if you check yes, you may not get the gun that you're asking for.
And I'm telling my husband, looking at him, something is gonna bad happen, something bad's gonna happen. He doesn't look right to me.
So what day of the week was that?
That was Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Wednesday.
So would that be 2 days before the incident at the Jewish Federation? Is that yes?
Yes.
We found out in the trial when Hawk's parents testified that they were very aware of his mental health problems. They were very aware that he was having massive manic depressive episodes and that he was obsessed with the news of the war in Israel and Lebanon.
Hawk always had access to mental health treatment. One of the things that the defense would play an awful lot upon was that several months before the killings, there had been a change in his medication. His main medication had been lithium. They changed it to Effexor.
And have there been any studies implicating Effexor in either suicidality or homicidality?
Yes, homicidal ideation is included.
Dr. Julian, do you have any opinion about the likelihood of the shooting incident happening had Mr. Hawk remained on lithium?
Removal of the lithium was followed by a year of increasing mental problems that culminated in a disastrous event. The incident may well not have occurred had lithium been continued. The incident may not have happened.
So they tried to play the medication boogeyman and claim that Effexor, caused him to have these homicidal thoughts that he then acted upon.
Hallucination is a false perception. And by perception, it means that if you're the person that has the hallucinations, you actually regard yourself as hearing something. And what he says is that he'd heard, "Go on a mission." Well, that was it. Now, he says he took that to be God. He then, at the Jewish Federation, again reported hearing words like, "One was murdered, one was awesome." That also would imply that his perception at the time that this was going on was sufficiently disordered that he would qualify for a diagnosis of a psychotic element to a psychotic aspect of his manic syndrome.
Basically, it came down to whether or not Naveed Hawk's mental illness was so great that he didn't understand that he was doing something wrong at the time of the crime.
Did you form any opinion regarding whether Mr. Hawk was sane or insane at the time of the shootings at the Jewish Federation?
I did.
And what is your opinion?
My opinion is that Mr. Hawk was insane.
The insanity defense that Hawk's attorneys put forward was substantial. The defense relied a lot on Naveed Hawk's history, and especially his recent history, to show he was a person who had significant mental illness that was symptomatic in the moments leading up to the shooting and after.
Please give your time to Mr. Radis, who's at closing argument on behalf of the state.
He was frustrated, he was angry, he was suicidal, but he wasn't insane. His mission was to end his life and to finally be something, to finally be significant. And in his death, deliver a message about the plight of the Muslims throughout the world. He planned, he intended. But it took the murder of Pam Wechter and the near murders of Dana Klein, Cheryl Stumbo, Carol Goldman, Christina Rexroad, and Layla Bush for him to deliver his message. The cost of that message was high, and now it must be paid. Find Naveed Hawk guilty of murder in the first degree, and find him guilty of the other charges that he is charged with.
Mr. Hawk had a delusional belief that by coming to the Jewish Federation and getting on CNN, that he could change the course of two wars, the war in Iraq and the conflict going on in Lebanon. He further believed that when he received this mission, which he came to believe was from God, it's our position that given this delusional belief on his part, that he was doing God's work, he was God's instrument, and that he was there to bring about peace in the Middle East. He didn't know right from wrong. He thought what he was doing was right. He thought he was going to save lives. He thought he was doing what God willed. He didn't know the nature and quality of his act, not the true nature and quality of his act. I would suggest that it is abundantly clear, based upon all of the evidence that you heard, that this terrible shooting and Ms. Wechter's death and the injuries to those 5 women never would have occurred but for Mr. Hawk's mental illness and but for medication issues in this case. And I'm asking that you return verdicts not guilty by reason of insanity.
I wanted him in prison because I didn't want there to be any chance of him being released, especially for Kelsey. You know, I didn't want the rest of her life to be living in fear of the day that he was going to get out.
What I did for God. You are just mentally disturbed of me. No, I'm not. I'm fine.
After more than 5 weeks of testimony, jurors began their deliberations. The issue at hand: was Naveed Haq insane when he stormed the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle, killing Pam Wechter and wounding 5 other women? After 8 days of deliberating, the jury returned. What happened next was shocking.
The jury has returned a verdict form 6A, in which the verdict form reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant Naveed Haq not guilty of the crime of attempted murder in the first degree as charged in count 6. The jury has been called back into the courtroom to discuss whether there's a reasonable probability as to reaching a unanimous verdict as to the other counts that are before the jury. I find there's no reasonable probability of the jury reaching an agreement. The circumstances before the court constitute extraordinary and striking circumstances that substantial justice cannot be done without declaring a mistrial. Accordingly, I declare a mistrial."
When they came back hung, the courtroom was filled with staff and survivors from the Federation, our families, and we were just shocked.
Hung jury. Hung jury allows us, however, to try it again and learn from what we did and what we didn't do first time around.
And I remember that the defense team came to us, of course, and said, well, let's talk about a plea. And they went over our heads and went to Dan Soderberg, the elected prosecutor, and told him that, you know, they should accept a plea. I remember having a conversation just one-on-one with Dan, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, you have to let me try this case again. And he goes, well, what's the difference going to be? And I said, because I'll win this case the next time.
The biggest difference between the trials was the jail phone calls.
There were audio tapes of his conversations from jail in which he told his mother that he knew what he was doing, that he did it purposefully, and he didn't sound mentally ill, particularly in those conversations.
We had those jail calls available to us during the first trial, but legally, there were a couple of appeals pending before the Washington State Supreme Court where there had been challenges on constitutional grounds as to the propriety of the state's use of jail phone calls. So, second trial, we had them available to us. They established that Haq was a pretty logical, thoughtful, articulate person.
Well, I have nothing to forgive. I did the right thing.
All right, Naveed, you be careful.
What do you mean, be careful? No. You should look. I got the Jews. You know,
Hey.
They were enemies. You should be proud of what I did.
No.
You know, I want to tell you, I did this for Allah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, kiya karo.
What I did for God.
But all this happened because of your sickness.
No, it didn't.
Your sickness, you are just mentally disturbed, Naveed.
No, I'm not. I'm fine.
Yeah, that's what you think. I hope you just calm yourself.
I want her to be a martyr.
Now he had time to reflect. He had been questioned by law enforcement. He was sitting in custody. And he could have said things like, Mom, I don't know why I did it, and I feel terrible about it. He didn't say anything like that. He was proud of what he did. He was filled with hate. And that impacted the jury as to what his mental state was at the time of the crime and in the days after the crime.
For that poor woman, she died. I hope she never had been died. Otherwise, the things would have been different.
Maybe she deserved it.
Maybe
She's an Israeli collaborator. I don't feel bad about what I did.
The jail calls showed that Hawk really did give this thought. And I think that was a problem for the defense because this wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a sudden, somebody snapping. He'd put thought into this. Immediately after the shooting, he still, to a degree, believed in what he'd been doing.
I will read the verdict. Verdict form 1A. We, the jury, find the defendant.
The damning jailhouse calls between Naveed Hawk and his mother, along with all of the other evidence, seemed like enough to convince the second jury that Hawk was guilty. But the prosecution had learned from the outcome of the first trial not to take anything for granted. So they decided to do something a little different this time.
We decided that Aaron Ehlert, my co-counsel, should do closing. Having Aaron as a female standing up there was just a little bit more to remind the jurors of who the targets and who the victims were in this case. And additionally, she did a fantastic job.
I started preparing that second closing argument as soon as that first jury came back hung. This was a case where it just all had to come out. And it had to be emotional and it had to be impactful, and I just did the best I could.
Here are the two firearms that Naveed Hawk has concealed in this laptop bag, 40 caliber and a 45 caliber. Remember what he chooses not to take. He chooses not to take the shotgun. Remember, he had even purchased a sling so he could put that shotgun over his shoulder. And he talks to Dr. Wheeler about why he doesn't bring the shotgun. Because if he's walking in the streets of Seattle and he's carrying a shotgun, someone may stop him. Someone may think that's perhaps someone who's intending to do harm. When he is driving to the Federation, he stops on the way and he pulls over and he takes out those two guns, the 40 and the 45. He walks a ways away from the highway and he takes a shot with each. Because as he indicates, he wants to figure out which gun has a lighter trigger pull, which one is more comfortable for him to shoot. Why is a person test firing firearms if they had no intention of using them? Well, that doesn't make sense. He has every intention of using them, and he wants to be comfortable with the firearm he is using.
Mr. Hawk is not guilty by reason of his mental illness, by reason of his insanity. He had a mental disease or defect on July 28, 2006. It was so serious. It is so persistent. It is so acute that it affected his ability to perceive the nature and quality of his acts. It affected his ability to know the difference between right and wrong.
I understand the jury has reached a verdict. Are we ready for the jury?
Yes, sir. That's ready.
Thank you.
I was in an outpatient clinic because they were treating one of the lingering wounds, and I got the phone call. The jury's come back. I got up from the exam table and said, I have to go. And so they packaged me up so I could get down to the courthouse. And I got in and you could just feel the electricity in the air when you walked into the courtroom.
I will read the verdict. Verdict Form 1A. We, the jury, find the defendant, Naveed Haq, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree as charged in count 1. Verdict form as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant, Naveed Haq, guilty of the crime of attempted murder in the second degree as charged in count 2.
When they said guilty, it was like this huge collective sigh. It was like, it's finally over. Justice has been done.
It was a great relief knowing that he was finally going to pay for the crimes that he committed and pay for what he had done to all these women. And I didn't think a mental institution was something that would suffice for him. You know, he needed to go to prison.
I don't think, as a prosecutor, you ever really feel overjoyed when someone is convicted. I mean, I don't forgive and I don't feel good about Naveed Haq because of what he did. He took a life, but I felt good and satisfied that we had done a good job and were in a position to appropriately punish somebody for what they had done.
My goal throughout this case was not only to prove the elements of the murder and the attempted murders, but to prove that the impetus behind all of this was hate towards a group of people who represented something to this individual that he hated. And that was really important to prove. I treasure that I had the honor to represent all these women.
I think to some degree it's going to be there at some level the rest of my life. It can't be erased. It's a part of me. It's helped form who I've become. I'm an advocate and I work for Everytown because of what happened to me, because of my experience as a survivor. The survivors that I work with, they inspire me every day. I have more purpose now. I know that the work that I'm doing is going to help save lives.
My takeaway on this was that, like so many of the crimes that I've covered, there just wasn't anything keeping Naveed Haq from committing these crimes. Fact of the matter is, if Naveed Haq walked into the gun shop tomorrow, he would still be able to get a gun. I don't think they're checking. I don't think that anybody is trying to stop folks from accessing firearms. It's a mess.
Naveed Haq was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 120 years. He's currently serving his sentence at the Monroe Correctional Complex in Washington State. I'm Ashley Banfield. Thanks for watching.